A little bit more on why people migrate. From the perspective of a geographer, we tend to categorize people's movement into one of two types of factors, either push factors or pull factors. In my opinion, this terminology makes a lot of sense. Push factors means you are leaving a place, the things that motivate you to leave. Pull factors means these are going to be the things that draw you to a place. Of course, we can mix in emigration with an E into this, which means leaving a place, and immigration with an I, which means coming to a place. We can then further parse push and pull factors as either being voluntary or forced migration. This terminology, again, I think makes sense. Voluntary migration means that you have a choice in it. Forced migration means that you really have no choice, and if you do not move, you may very well have to leave the planet permanently. Then we take the push and pull factors and we further split them up into the actual reasons. And there are political reasons that people leave and are drawn to a place, economic reasons that people leave and are drawn to a place, and environmental reasons that people leave and are drawn to a place. So in other words, what's going to happen is this. There are political push, economic push, and environmental push factors. There are political pull, economic pull, and environmental pull factors. That's what I'm going to talk about. Let's start with the push factors, and in particular, political reasons that people would have to leave a place. Well, if you and I were sitting in the same room, I'm sure we could come up with lots of these, but we're not. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a list here. These are some political push factors. War, probably the most common one. Slavery, deportation, famine, religious and/or ethnic persecution, lack of freedom and democracy, and/or I guess you could say political instability, and ideological issues like you and the government do not see eye to eye. Well, let's take this and then split it up even further. Here we go. Political reasons again that people are going to leave. War, that would be forced migration. Slavery, that would be forced migration. Deportation, forced migration. Famine, well, in most cases, this is also going to be forced migration. Religious and/or ethnic persecution, so this could be either forced or voluntary. It probably depends on how hard the push is from the dominating force on you as the religious or ethnic person who is being persecuted. Lack of freedom and democracy and political instability. Well, this is also forced or voluntary. I've been to Cuba. I can tell you that most people in Cuba live a very, very low existence by most American standards, but they don't want for anything, nor are people starving there. At the same time, if you speak out against the government in Cuba, it may be time to leave because you're probably going to be arrested. So if you like the government or you're willing to tolerate the government, probably you're going to be willing to stay. And if you decide to leave, that would be more of a voluntary migration. But if you speak out against the government or you're in an opposition political party, you may find yourself persecuted, and that would cause you to leave. That would be forced migration. Ideological issues, this kind of goes with what I was just saying. This is probably mostly voluntary, but again, it's a bit of a gray area depending on how hard the persecution or pressure might be that was put on you by a governmental source. Okay, this picture, of course, is of Syrian people along the Turkish border, and it's clear that they are having to leave, carrying all their stuff. That would definitely be a version of forced migration. So what about something like ethnic cleansing? Well, the definition of ethnic cleansing is this. This occurs when a locally or regionally more powerful ethnic group forcibly removes a different ethnic group from their land and then occupies that land. So they're going to take your house from you after they kick you out. This is done to create homogeneity and eradicate resistance in an area. It could be tied to other factors also, like religion, language, and history. Usually these things are all wrapped up together, especially in places outside of the United States. What about genocide? Well, genocide is the premeditated elimination, that would be murder, of a specifically targeted group of people. I think everybody is aware of the Holocaust and what happened to Jews during World War II in Europe. That's a very, very famous genocide, but there have been lots of genocides through time. I guess you could go all the way back to Homo sapiens killing off Neanderthals. But there is some sort of gray area in a way between ethnic cleansing and genocide. I think we know when somebody is being coerced to leave an area, and we know when people are, because of their ethnicity or the religion or whatever it may be, lined up against a wall and shot. But there is some area between that in some cases probably leans more heavily towards genocide, and in other cases leads towards ethnic cleansing. What do we call people who are fleeing? Well, these people are called refugees. Refugees are compelled to leave their country or region and cannot safely return because of a fear of persecution or even death resulting from their ethnicity, their social status, their religion, their political affiliation, and probably a number of other things as well. Take a look at this graph. This shows over the previous 30 years. I realize this isn't yesterday, but it's close enough in time to where we are now, that you can see that the number of forcibly displaced people has actually increased over the last, say, decade or so. You can see we're right about 79.5 million people who have been forcibly displaced, and they come from a variety of places and for a variety of reasons, but the number is fairly substantial. Now take a look at this map. You can see that the blue circles indicate countries that are receiving refugees. And you can notice Turkey, quite a big circle. Germany, pretty big. We know this is coming out of the Middle East, especially Syria, probably Iraq. If you take a look at Pakistan, what about that? Well, Pakistan, because people flee Afghanistan. And if you look just to the left of Pakistan, just to the west, you can see Iran. People usually don't think Iran would be a country that people would be fleeing into. But the fact is, if you think about what's around Iran, that's what causes this. People fleeing Afghanistan, people fleeing Iraq, and they feel safer in Iran than they do in those two places. And then you can see Colombia, which receives a lot of people from Venezuela. Okay, here's some data, or data, if that's how you want to pronounce it. 1% of the world's population is displaced. You see 80% of the world's displaced people are in countries or territories affected by acute food insecurity and malnutrition. 73% are hosted in neighboring countries. And you can see some of the top hosting countries: Turkey, Colombia, Pakistan, Uganda, Germany. 68% come from just 5 countries: Syria, Venezuela, Afghanistan, South Sudan, and Myanmar. 40% of the world's displaced people are children, and 85% are hosted in developing countries, which means not really, really wealthy countries, countries that are moving towards wealth but are still not there. And you can see Turkey, Colombia, Pakistan, Uganda. Those are 4 of them. Here's some more push factors. Economic reasons that people leave a place. Well, poverty is probably the most obvious one. You live in a place, everybody's poor, everybody's always been poor. When you look in your crystal ball, what do you see? Poverty. Leave. No hope for betterment, which goes along with that, especially when you add that in with no ability to get a good education or move your life along. So lack of educational opportunities, which would go right along with this. And then lack of or poor health care. There are people in the United States who move from one state to another because the healthcare is better in a different state. And one more push factor: environmental reasons. Like, for example, weather and climate. Really, in the United States, the Northeast and the upper Midwest have drained people in most cases over the last 5 or 6 decades, and those people have gone to the South and to the West because they like the climate better. Things like natural disasters, hurricanes, earthquakes, flooding, fires, mudslides. These cause people to leave. Famine. which might be political, but it may not be political. Okay, now let's look at some pull factors. What things draw people to a place? So the same three things: political, economic, and environmental. Political reasons that draw people to a place. Well, freedom and democracy. This has historically at least been one of the great draws of the United States and democracies throughout the world. Religious tolerance, ethnic acceptance. Some more pull factors. Economic reasons. The perception that the economic possibilities are better in this other place. This again is a great draw of the United States. As we know, a lot of times first-generation immigrants don't actually become rich in this country. It happens, of course, but the perception is that you have greater possibilities when you're in this country, the United States. Educational opportunities, let's face it, we have the greatest higher education system on earth. Job opportunities, healthcare, and one more pull factor, environmental reasons, weather and climate. Of course, this is, as I said, what draws people to the south and to the west. Location near physical amenities like the ocean, mountains, fishing, hiking, clean air, solitude. This often goes along with retirement. All right, so take a look at this map. I love this. This is movement and migration. The red circles are places that are experiencing large amounts of out-migration, the blue in-migration, and then those yellow lines indicate where people are going from and to. Take a look at that. Now notice this. The white arrow is pointing at Syria. Okay, that's it right there. And then the green arrow is pointing at Afghanistan. The yellow arrow is pointing at, that would be China. The purple arrow, the Philippines. The kind of rust-colored arrow, India. A lot of people leave India and go to other places to work. And then you can see the blue arrow is South Sudan. Now look at these are places that are receiving people. The yellow arrow, Canada. The purple arrow, the United States. The green arrow, South Africa, coming out of other countries in the southern part of Africa. This is a lot of it's for work. The blue arrow to Australia. The white arrow, you can see that is Iran, like I told you. And then you can see that rust-colored arrow is Turkey, all recipients. Take a look at the United States. You can see where we are getting people from. Overwhelmingly two areas, right? Mexico, Central America, and the Caribbean. And then you can see out of Eastern Asia, China, and then South Asia, India. I told you a lot of people leave there. But this is for work. This isn't necessarily for persecution. Vietnam, the Philippines. I thought this one was really interesting. Australia. You can see where Australia draws people from. Well, some of this South Africa, because it's English-speaking. Ireland, the UK, because English-speaking places. China, job opportunities. India, job opportunities. But look at over here. New Zealand. I find this funny. The people from New Zealand fleeing to go to Australia. Because I think most people in the United States see New Zealand as almost a nirvana in some ways. Utopian landscape, a place that Americans would love to go to and live. Apparently New Zealanders don't feel the same way.